Hello, everyone, and welcome to the eShe panel at the Ananke Women in Literature Festival 2024. My name is Ekta Kapoor, and I'm the founder and editor of eShe, a media platform based in India that highlights women's voices and stories of our shared humanity. We've collaborated with Ananke for various virtual events in the past, and I'm very honored to be here again. I'd first of all like to thank Sabine Muzaffar, the driving force behind Ananke. Sabine is based in Dubai and has more than 20 years of experience in print and digital media. She has been associated with UN Women, the Sherry Blair Foundation, and several other organizations that are working towards women's empowerment. So thank you, Sabine, for all your endeavors and especially for not giving up with your mission of digital empowerment for women. So thanks a lot for this platform here today.
Thank you so much, Ekta, for being such an amazing ally. You know, we could not have done what we're doing if we didn't have people like yourself, organizations like eShe. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. And I will introduce our panelists for the day. Andali Wajid is an amazingly prolific author, having published more than 45 novels in the past 14 years. And she writes in different genres, from young adult and romance to horror. She also writes nonfiction. Andalib has two upcoming novels in 2024, Scarewalk, a graphic horror novel, and Everything Sucks, a young adult romance. Her previous novel, Asmara's Summer, has been adapted for a web series on Amazon Prime, and it releases this month, so that must be exciting for you. And thank you so much, Andalib, for being here today.
Thank you, Ekta. It releases tomorrow, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Great timing then.
yeah.
And thank you. And Manjul Bajaj is our next panelist. She used to work as a development and environment professional for many years before she became an author. Her debut novel, Come Before Evening Falls, and her collection of short stories, Another Man's Wife, were both shortlisted for the Hindu Literary Prize. And I remember that after I read Manjul's first book, I've been a fan of her evocative writing ever since then. And I'm so happy to have her here on the eShe panel today. She has also authored two children's books. And her latest work is The Book of Bulla, and an English translation of the poems of Bulle Shah, the Punjabi mystic poet. So thank you, Manjul, for being here today.
Thanks. It's wonderful being here. I was just thinking, I forgot In Search of Fear, which was my last novel, and I'm
Yes,
really
In Search
delighted.
of Heat. Yes. In Search of Heat was, in fact, listed for several prizes, including the JCB Prize 2020, I think. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for that.
Next up, we have Milan Vora, who juggles fiction and advertising campaigns. Her first book, The Love Asana, was, it was India's first Mills and Boon novel from India. She was the first Indian author. Her novel, TikTok with 30, has been acquired for screen adaptation, and she has written several other romance novels and the musical comedy Made in India. Her short stories have been featured in various anthologies, and she writes op-eds and fiction for various media platforms as well. She's a TEDx speaker and an award-winning advertising creative professional. Of course, I my relationship with Milan Vora goes back a long way because we were neighbors and we were part of the same Buddhist organization, and we were using Milan's sizable talent for our cultural performances. So it's great to have you here today, Milan.
Thank you, Ekta. Thank you so much, and I must use the opportunity to congratulate you on the wonderful story that you're in and sharing that romance. I mean, considering that we're talking about romance and reshaping it, I think that was quite an amazing example. And if you haven't read it, I mean, if you haven't seen it, you all should. It's the first
Thank you.
episode on Love Kahaniya, right?
Love story, huh?
Love
Yeah.
Love
story.
story.
I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for highlighting that. And of course, our panel moderator, that's Shalini Malik. She's a practicing doctor. She's, in fact, the head of the pathology department at a national level hospital in Delhi. And she's here because she's an author. Her debut novel, Stars from the Borderless Sea, was longlisted for the Author Awards 2023. And her new novel, The Way Home, is a journey of self discovery. She's been awarded various prizes for her writing, and I know her ever since she won eShe's short story contest in 2020. That story was published in eShe's anthology. Everything changed after that, 25 Women, 25 Stories. And since then, we've been in touch, and I'm very proud to say that we've been friends since then. So, thank you, Shalini, for moderating this panel. And I will now hand over to you to take this forward. And I'll be here behind the scenes and watching this very exciting panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Ekta, and thank you, Sabin, for the opportunity. So, after Ekta's introductions, I don't think I can add anything. But what I want to add at a personal level is that this panel is extra special for me because I've truly enjoyed the work of all three of our panelists. They're very different in their scope and everything. But there are many panels where you go back and read a panelist's work once you know you're going to be talking to them. Here, that's not the case. I've been reading these people, enjoying these people. So, talking is going to be a learning experience for me. And I hope that, I can do justice to the phenomenal talent that we have here. So, the topic for the day, as Ekta and Sabin have given us, is love in books and life, romance and the female gaze. So, my first thought on romance is I love reading romance. Uh, I mean, romance, heteronormative romance, by definition, is a very balanced playing field. It has a male character, a female character, and of course, other characters. And compared to other genres, it has a very strong representation of the female protagonist. Still, why is it regarded as chick lit or women's literature, and why is it like piled into a category that only women read it? And also, there are very few male people writing romance, so this space is becoming almost a female only space, right? So, what are your thoughts about that? I mean, do you think that what I'm saying is really happening? Is that true? And what does that mean for people like us who are writing romance? So, Milan, would you like to tell us something? Your thoughts about that?
I think that yes, largely it has been dominated by women, but as we've seen in India also, we've seen that some of the the large selling authors are men, and they're telling their stories, from their point of view, and I believe that their readership is definitely of both genders. It's not. I mean, I have seen the large. Female reader base that they have, but I think that the stories are like are about a man's breakup or being ditched or lost or whatever. So I think that the fact that they're writing it from their point of view, it shows that there is definitely there is enough stories being told. There are enough stories being told from the male point of view, and they find more than enough readers. When I entered the Milton Boone contest, I was also very pleasantly surprised to find that there were men who were also entering and writing for that contest. In fact, the person who won the second prize, and this was like 13 years ago, whatever, was an IIM professor, and then he kind of did a googly, and he kind of vanished because I think he wrote it maybe on a lark, and then he thought, do I necessarily want to attach romance to my name or whatever? So the fact is that we've known so many of our friends will kind of sheepishly say, yeah, I used to take my mom's romances or my grandmom's romances and read them, so those readers have always been there. I don't think that there's something very new about this. And even internationally, people like Nicholas Sparks and all, there are enough men writing in this space.
That's very
I,
true. And even
yeah.
I remember, stealing Milton Boons from a male cousin of mine who was 4 years older. So I think you're right. Anjali, what do you think about this?
I think, yeah, what, I was also thinking of those few male writers who are dominating India's scene, as Milan said. The thing is, I think there is also a sort of demarcation in India where you don't have, like, see, we all write different kinds of romances. We're not like, it's not, it doesn't exactly, apart, like, I think apart from the Mills and Boone thing that Milan wrote, afterwards, whatever you wrote is not like strictly like, romance as it's defined
No.
abroad, at least. So we
Yeah.
don't have that sort of an ecosystem here where you have like the romance as a genre is considered very differently internationally. Here it is not so much, as have like dedicated romance novelists, at least in the trade sphere. You don't have people who like exclusively write romance novels, because again, there is sadly there is that stigma which I think authors want to avoid, even though they are proud to be writing it. I think it's changing. However, it's changing. We do have its thing. And about women not reading it, again, this is there's the if you see how, I'm sorry, about men not reading and only women reading, that is to a certain extent it's true, but there are also male readers. I think Milan also used to get DMs from male readers, I think, on social media. I also get messages from a few male readers who've read the romances and who've enjoyed it. I think the definition of romance in India as a proper genre needs to, like, be a little more evolved. We are getting there, but I don't think we're there. Like, we don't have writers like Tessa Bailey, or Lucy Score, or so many of these who are dedicated romance writers who have, or Emily Henry. You have these dedicated romance writers abroad internationally, and they have these huge fandoms. And we in India are still not on that level, even though we have so much of romance writing in our books. I don't think we've reached that level. So I think there is room to grow for us, for other writers, and hopefully things will change going forward.
Very true. Manjul, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I agree with both Milan and Anjali that one, that there are men writing romance in India doing very well. And there is a male readership too. And the other thing is, we don't really have that kind of romance genre here, like imprint like Mills and Boone, or although is there Mills and Boone in India? I'm not sure, but this.
They shut shop.
Yeah, so there isn't that much of just pure romance writing. Everybody's coming from a more mixed perspective, and me, I'd say I do write romance because I write about the love between men and women, but it's not always comfortable and it's not always guaranteed to end in a happy place. Or hero might turn out to be a cat. So there are no guarantees to the reader that it's going to be feel good, which is one of the main criteria when we look.
So I think we lost Manjul there, right? Oh.
Yeah, the last we didn't hear the last bit.
Well, I said that. What did I say now? I said, yeah, that I do write about the love between men and women, and about romantic relationships. It doesn't confirm from romance genre because it's not always pleasant or feel good or happy in the end.
I think those are very relevant thoughts. Uh, that the fact that our romance writing in India is sort of broader and less defined than it is abroad, and everything really does need to be seen in that context. On that note, the female gaze. I mean, a lot of times women complain that they are being stereotyped when uh, male writers are presenting them, especially in romance novels or in romantic portions of books. And so, similarly, there are people who actually raise the thought that will the female gaze objectify the male reader, the male protagonist? Sorry. So, what are your thoughts on this? Because as a writer, when you etch out your characters, how are you doing it, and how are you achieving a balance between the male and the female protagonist, and where does your individual female gaze come into your writing? So, Andali, would you like to take this one first?
Yeah, I think so. I don't go for balance at all, and I
Okay.
think I go for completely unreal characters, and they can be as unattainable and unreal as possible, because anyway it's my story and I'm writing it. And as for the female gaze, I think we're several years behind. A lot to catch up. So why not have female gaze? And I think I think what readers do enjoy about reading about these unreal and unattainable men is that when they're reading it, they do have a sense of, being seen. I mean, so what? It's not wrong to find a man desirable, to a certain traits in a man desirable. So I think, when readers read that, they feel seen in a way, which is why I think romance is so popular. You do want to see people who look a certain way, who are presented a certain way, whether they're like, whether it's their height, their physique. I mean, it's not like the characters I write are perfect physically or otherwise, but I think, you aim for, what I try to aim for is this balance between personality and looks, so that, which is also very unreal. I mean, it's very unreal. Where do you find such people? So I think, whenever people ask me about this, I'm like, it's fiction, so I'm allowed to write whatever I want, so I can take it to whichever level I want. So that's my excuse.
No, I think that's very true. And I think that's also probably why it resonates with the reader, because the reader is also looking for that kind of a man, right? And not
Yeah.
finding them.
I
So,
mean, our real life itself is very mundane. And, see, at the end
yes.
of the day, the reader, who is a very normal person, will shut the book and go back to, their normal life, which
Yeah.
has a lot of, obviously, the person you're sharing your life with will not look like, a movie hero or the hero in the book. But that's okay, because, when you were reading it, that was fantasy. You could live in that fantasy for that moment, and then you come back to reality, and reality doesn't sting that hard, when you have books to kind of, tide you over. I think that's the logic I go with, at least.
I think very true. Very true. Manjul, your thoughts on this?
I have a slightly sort of serious take on this, that even the women authors or women's romance actually gets men through the male gaze. The hero is always sort of handsome and brawny and out to protect you. He's sort of alpha male and he must earn a lot. And so we haven't really gone out of patriarchy's clutches as far as looking at the hero, even if it's women writers writing, it's the construct. So what I tried in Search of Hero is sort of radically different. In the sense, in Rancha, I have a hero who has no land, who sort of has only his talents, his sense of humor to commend him, and he doesn't want to pick up the sword and fight for the heroine. And I was asking a serious question: can you deal with a hero like that? Can you deal with a hero who's a pacifist, doesn't own property, who has only his talent to recommend him? Because it says important things about the who shrugs off the burden of masculinity and is able to channel his more feminine attributes. And what kind of heroine does that call for then? If we are able to leave our hero um, without those masculine attributes, then is there a balancing in which the heroine can express herself, in which she can be her own woman, in which she can fight her own battles? So that's what I did with the female gaze, as in my gaze on gender relationships in Search of Fear. So.
So I think that's very interesting, because it brings us to the point. It takes us to the point where we examine ourselves and our thoughts and their relation to patriarchy when we are writing as well as reading. So that's a very interesting thought. So, Milan, what about you and your writing when it comes to this?
The female gaze versus the male gaze, I think that, I agree with Manjul, the fact that the very fact that we had to, that somewhere in the mid of last century, this phrase was coined, and the scale of reference was always the male gaze. And I think the three things that always come up when you're talking about the male gaze, and therefore I would say that by the with the female gaze as well. You talk about objectification, you're talking about the power dynamics in a relationship, and you'd be talking about the narrative structure. So for instance, say a show like Baywatch, the very fact that you had to have what's her name, Pamela Anderson, who's only a prop or a support kind of a person there, who's got no real role, who's got no real part in the story. I just remember seeing it in passing, but I'm just saying that things like that were very typical of the male gaze. And if you look at the fact that if today also we're talking about people subverting that,
Yeah.
films, let's say, where the woman is the boss and she needs to hire her secretary to act like a fake fiance when she goes off. I'm forgetting the name of the film. They had to go off to Canada. I think it had Sandra Bullock in the main role. So I think the very fact that we are still using these as terms that we are referring to, that itself is self-defeating.
Yeah.
And I think the other problem is the fact that all genres, this romance is also, is a major genre, and all genres have their tropes. And particularly in tropes, I think the fact is that readers seem to have certain set expectations, and in romance that has existed for a very long time. So I think that what happens, especially in a universe, in the sub universe, let's say, especially of self-published books or whatever, tropes seem to be a very major thing. And you see authors who are even flagging that trope in the title to make sure that people get it, that this is a fake fiance, or this is a masquerade or whatever. Like, in the earlier days, you had women who were, in the historical ones, you had women who were dressing as page boys or something and who were in a home, but you were still all working within the trope.
Yeah.
So to my mind, I think that all of those things become a little irrelevant now, because of the fact that, as Anjali said also, when we're writing, we're just wanting to write a story. And whether we do it consciously or not, all of us, our writing is reflecting our times. And this is something, there is no escaping it. If you pick up any 10 pieces of popular culture from our times now, we will find that whether it was 50 Shades of Grey, if you say, let's say, take a 20-year span, and you saw that there was definitely a very definite gaze, and it was a female writer writing it, but was also playing into fantasy and saying, okay, now my times permit me to talk about fantasies that earlier I wasn't. So earlier, if there was the Barbara Cartland era or whatever, and people were writing fantasy even then, and by fantasy I mean not just your the physicality of a person, but even in terms of what you wanted from a character. If you wanted understanding or tenderness or vulnerability or any of those things. So I think that the only thing is that we need to be aware that whatever we are writing is actually reflecting the times we're living in. I remember somebody sent me a book recently, and the book is called Swap, and it's about couples spouse swapping or whatever it is. So all of this, now what is it in that? There is no, I remember skipping through it, and I remember I didn't see any particular power dynamic. It was more about how relationships unraveled and crumbled and whatever, and then somewhere or the other they came back to some idea of romance in it. I think that all of it, we need to just be aware that we are also putting little time pieces for for our generation and our period, and 20 years later people are saying, like, honestly, like, were people really like that? That's definitely there. And as far as fantasy goes, who's to tell somebody that this should be your fantasy or that should not be your fantasy? And again, we're seeing popular culture reflecting that change. Like, I remember this movie Three of Us, I think, which had um, uh, um, Vijay Lawat and Shefali Shah. Did you all
Yeah.
see it?
Yeah.
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 So now he's far from your chocolate boy kind of hero or anything, right? He's deliberately, in fact, in many films, they've actually accentuated his bad skin, and he's very real. He's got a humble job somewhere, in a bank or something, and she's still held on to that idea of the romance that they had when they were in school, and she's coming back to revisit it because she's losing her memory, and there's early onset of dementia. So, and he is so desirable, and he's so vulnerable and so tender with her. And so to me, it was an amazing romance, but it had none of those what you think you're ticking off boxes in terms of in terms of fantasy or stereotypes, which is what you expect with something coming from a particular gaze.
I think that's very true because that's what I was going to ask. That in our times, it's not really the physicality or even the, when someone's a multimillionaire and nothing, it's more at an emotional level. And that is mirroring, right? Because that is what the women of today seem to find missing in the men. And, so what Milan said about the movie, a lot of people, myself included, like totally, you want a guy who's he writes poetry and he's so considerate. And as Andalip said, that we don't find those guys, and that is why we go and write them, right? So I think
Yeah.
the gaze is not just about physicality or about the kind of professions that women would find enticing. It is also about the connect that women are looking for, which I felt was always less explored in the past. So again, I think what Milan said, it's a sign of the times. So, having said that, then this female gaze, as we said, the term continues, right? What should it be? We've discussed that just flipping it is also not okay. In some many ways, we are subverting it. What does this female gaze ideally bring to writing? For all of you, Manjul,
Should
would
I just
you?
shoot off? Should I just shoot off? I really think that these terms should be thrown out of the window. Male gaze, female gaze, all of it out. Because the fact is that as long as we're referring to something as female gaze or whatever, then the point of reference is as a counterpoint to the male gaze. Ah, okay, now we're rewriting the. No, we're actually wanting to tell stories that we think are interesting or believable or whatever, So I think that that's one thing that should go. And even with that, like even when you was when you were talking about we want men who are, I think that whole thing of female gaze also assumes a certain kind of character to women, that we are supposed to be nurturers and caregivers, and we're the ones who are bringing that to the table, and now we'll bring that to the writing. No, why? you know I'd be very happy with a romance where the woman is happy to own being a bitch, you know and he loves that about her or whatever, so why should I put her into that box also?
I think very valid point. And each one's lived experiences are different. Women's gaze is again boxing our stories, so that is very very true. But yet, when this term is used, there are a lot of people who feel sort of threatened by this term. Uh, is that because when women are writing, let's not use the word female gaze, but when women are writing, do people fear that women will show women having more agency, and is that could that be a reason why somehow or the other this term is not appreciated by others? Do you think so, Milan?
I imagine that this is exactly what I was saying about being reflective of our times. The fact
Yeah.
is that today women have more agency, and if you're writing characters who have more agency, then it is that's what we are reflecting. We're living in
Absolutely.
times where a woman is able to say, "Yeah, man, I want to go into the red room with this guy, and I've made a choice." I'm referring to Fifty Shades of Grey, and or anything else. It's not agency, not just about sex, but anything else. So I think that I don't see anybody being threatened by it.
That's good. Andali, what do you think? What about your readers?
Earlier
You
question, I had a little bit to add. What Manjul said about her hero, I felt it was very interesting also because it brings up the point of, who is considered desirable. Okay. You don't, I think because over the years, when you look at romance, so the whole distinction between romance and love stories, like a love story need not end in a happily ever after, but romance typically, if you go by the definition by what is sold, it has that happily ever after ending, or what is called happy for now. So it just made me think about a lot of things, like who is considered desirable, and why do we not see more such characters? Why do we not see characters who people who are real, who like Manjul described her hero as a pacifist, as someone who is not concerned about property and land and all that, which I find very fascinating. But if you are looking at a typical romance reader who wants to read a certain, because for many people romance is a form of escapism. So, and what Milan also talked about, the various tropes, which is, she's absolutely right about that, because I also self-publish, so I'm aware of the kind of books that readers want, you know so they have certain expectations. A lot of my books, hardly any of my books feature characters, heroes who are millionaires or billionaires. I don't write those kind of heroes. I write, the boy next door sort of person and those kind of stories. But what I have noticed is that readers want to see that. There are readers who actually want. So you have a trope called billionaire romance, you have a trope called this. So those are the things where readers identify what sort of fantasy they want to indulge in today. So I have a lot of readers who enjoy the kind of relatable stories I write, but they also want to get into that. So I just wanted to make those two points very quickly. And what was it you were asking, Shalini? I'm so sorry, I forgot.
So I think we were discussing about we spoke about whether some people are sort of threatened or
Ah,
they would appreciate the agency that we give our characters, and then Milan told us, and I
yeah.
mean, about how
Yeah, yeah,
times, and it's not
yeah.
just about the life partner; it's about a woman going to work, a woman choosing to study. So, what do you think about this?
I think I agree with what she said. Our books reflect the times that we are living in. So, because of course, books are a huge part of our culture. So, definitely, women are doing more than what. So, you have stories about um, acceptable stories about where there are things, there are tropes where you have one woman and multiple men. So those sort of things are also, a lot of stuff is happening out there in the world of books. So I wouldn't say it accurately reflects what exactly is happening in the world. What I'm trying to say is that people are more open to a lot of experiences, to a lot of different things. And I don't think anyone is threatened by that, because the writers of these sort of books are women. Women are open to pushing the boundaries to see what readers can accept, and they are pushing all sorts of boundaries. So I'm talking about this with an eye on what I've read, with romances internationally. So it's not the same with us here in India. So yeah, that's, I don't think anyone's threatened, and
Would
everyone's all for it.
more boundaries, or are we pushing less boundaries? You said it's not the same.
No, no, I don't think there are. So again, things again are different. So I do. There are certain boundaries I don't push as a writer myself. So I think writers are open. I think Milan's daughter's written a very interesting book. Samya's book. It's called One Night Only, right?
Yeah.
Huh. So that's also pushing a lot of boundaries. So definitely, there is. I don't think there's anyone who's kind of afraid of the female women writing or owning the female gaze. I think they're owning it pretty well.
Lovely. So, Manjul, I think you've pushed a lot of boundaries in your writing right from day one.
What I'd like to say is that, as more of us write, and we come from different perspectives, like more women write, more gay writers write, more, as different people pick up, different ends of the love that they've been through, the stories, it's a very important thing for the readers to be able to see themselves. So, part of the job of writing romances or love stories or literature of any kind is to expand what is possible for the reader, to give them places and say, oh, this is my story, or this could be my story, or this also happens, in my small town or in my neighborhood or my community. So a lot of what we write, because we're writing to express ourselves, also finds an answering voice in a larger number of readers. And that's very important, the plurality of things. So let the male gaze be where it is, and the female gaze be, and that there be a hundred other types of gazes looking at love, because love really is very important at the end of the day. It's not just something you do from 16 to 26 and forget about for the rest of your life. So
That's such a lovely thought. So, romance, love are not, they cannot be separated from intimacy, right? And intimacy comes in different forms, emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, and combinations of all of these. So, when all of you write romance or love stories, which of these play a more active part in your writing, and how do you sort of put all these together to get that connection across to your reader? So, Manjul, why don't you tell us this first?
Dominated by hormones. Like, I really, I mean, the question is still out in my head that what is it that causes sexual attraction, and is it something greater than ourselves, or is it, temporary loss of reason? What exactly is this? Because it's very powerful, and it's sort of can it's like a force that takes you past a lot of your inhibitions, a lot of your taught, what you've grown up with, your values, everything. Once you're in love, or once you feel that sort of hormonal hit, you question a lot of things. And I really don't know what the answer is, but I explore it through my fiction more and more. That is this something greater than ourselves? Is it something that is leading us to forget about what we've been taught? And, cross barriers of religion, cross barriers of gender, you've been taught that because what society does to you is tells you that this is desirable, a male-female relationship, a relationship of equals in terms of socioeconomic status, in terms of caste, and then love just comes and trashes the whole thing, and it's very powered by what you're feeling in your body and what you're feeling. For me, yes, I sort of like to explore the sexual to spiritual angle. That is this greater than ourselves, because it makes us challenge the things that we've been brought up to believe. And it's also a question of vulnerability, how, and safety. And you cross a lot of limits, and are those limits the limits that you should be crossing to make a better world, or should you be staying in the confines of what you're taught? So yeah, so that's what I look at in my relationships and in my love stories.
That's a very, very thought provoking, uh, idea, which I really think I'll keep on thinking about after this, and how we present our things. Milan, what about you?
I'm on mute. Okay. Yeah, intimacy is actually really the most, to me, the most critical point in terms of when you're writing a romance. And I think that, strangely enough, from when we associated even the phrase with physical intimacy, or back when we were kids, and you would say you would want to flip the pages to come to the juicy bits or whatever, I think that almost every romance writer today, and I mean, I remember noticing even people like, say, Maria Ankees or Sophie Kinsella, all of them have some bits where the physical intimacy has been taken to a higher degree than you would have read in earlier books, and it's almost become like a hygiene thing that you would say that anyway needs to be explored, in the book, especially if it's about a love story or romance. But uh, the challenge is really where you're going to say, where did they connect, and that just a physical intimacy or the physical closeness that happened is not going to sustain. So, for example, in TikTok with 30, I think that the interesting part was the intimacy of nostalgia, the fact that you had a shared childhood. The characters had that as a history, and they knew things about each other that you would not know if you were just meeting two people, if it was a new interaction and so on. Or in our song, the intimacy of somebody who has a very deep passion, which in that case, in Ragini's case, was about her music, and the way it draws Andrew closer. That's a far deeper intimacy. And I think the third thing is always that, if you think about the intimacy between the writer and the reader, what is it that we think is going to actually uh, make that person, the person who's reading, connect, is going to be
Yeah.
the point where you have actually also made yourself most vulnerable. So initially, when I was writing romance, and for me, initially the challenge was in writing, say, the physical scenes, right? And then you say, okay, I'll find ways around this, and you did that. But even in our song, the most difficult part for me was to write the scene where she has to recall her father's death, and she's sharing it with the hero, you know. And later I had people who came back and talked about it. Or another time when she's talking about some molestation incident that happened with her, which was extremely, made her very fragile. So that intimacy of sharing with us as writers with the readers also, I think that is an intimacy which I think we're aware of and doing more and more now. Because that is really what's going to make the romance sing, including, say, books like Call Me by Your Name or whatever. Which I'm not talking only about these heteronormative romances.
Very true. I think that makes it believable. Like our authenticity when it shows on what we are writing, that is the connection with the reader. I think that's very very true. And also what you say. I mean, first let's get Andaleep on this. And Andaleep, what do you think?
Yeah. So I think, whatever I wanted to say, these two have already said it. But of course, at different levels, because we're different kind of writers. And when I started out, I was very hesitant. And I think, how much um, I think there's a point as a writer how much you're willing to how much of yourself you're willing to put out of there on the page, and it doesn't really mean that okay, if I can write a nice and spicy thing, that means I can put myself. It's not necessarily that. It's about, I think, learning that balance between how much of yourself to keep and how much of yourself to give away. So for me, what Milan said about that intimacy between the reader and the writer it resonates a lot with me, because I kind of make that decision each time I'm writing a book, whether I'm going to, what I'm going to include, what I'm going to, how much I'm going to write. So again, speaking strictly of a romance novel as such, writing romance as such, because I do write a lot of romance. And so when people pick up one of those books, they pick it up with a certain expectation, that there is going to be something over here. And I think as readers also, when you read a romance novel, you are waiting for that moment. You are, subconsciously you're waiting. Okay, when are they going to kiss? When is something more going to happen? So it kind of, that build up. So as a writer, for me to provide that build up and to hope that the payoff is worth it is something that I enjoy. I don't really mind, so it's something that's happened to me over time, with my evolution as a writer. If you look at my earlier novels and if you look at my novels that I write now, it's vastly different in those terms. At least, there are the I think I was very hesitant and very shy to write about a few things before, but now I've kind of, there's that phrase where they say, na, fake it till you make it. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to fake being very confident about these things. I'm going to just fake it and write with a lot of confidence that I don't feel myself. And I think it's worked, because so far at least, that readers really do enjoy it. And so far, I mean, there were initially, in the initial days when I'd written, I think when the first Jasmine Villa novel came out, when I self published it, I had a lot of readers who were shocked. They did not expect. So it's kind of worked out for me in that way that I think now I enjoy it. So I really don't look at it with such a deep perspective as what Manjul and Milan offered, but it's given me a lot to think about. So
Thank you so much, Andaleep. I think we are at the end of this session, at the end of the time allotted to us. And it's been absolutely fabulous for me listening to the three of you and gaining so many insights. Thank you so much for your thoughts, and thank you for agreeing to my to our request for being on this panel. I think over to Ekta now.
Yes, thank you, everybody. What an amazing discussion. And not just about your writing, but also about your characters, your plots. How do you bring in all the sex, and how do you bring in all the other aspects of the women's agency, and It's been a very enlightening conversation for me. I've never attempted writing romance or fiction, but it sounds pretty hard, I must say. And hats off to you guys for making a huge success of it. And really, really inspired by you. And thank you for being here. And thanks once again to Sabine for this platform. And you can watch the whole video will be up on all our social platforms. So if you've missed it, you can watch it. And stay tuned, and we're going to have a lot more things happening on eShe TV, and another session coming up tomorrow on Ananke from, in collaboration with eShe. So thanks, everybody. Thanks so much for being here, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.